So this one's going to be a tiny bit different, as I am going to be talking about homebrew of creation of races and classes. This will also kind of show you how to do spells. But given that this is just me talking about stuff that isn't, officially supported in the game, we'll see how much your interest is. Now the specific layout here we're talking about is 5e, but once you see how they reference the base text, you should be able to identify what that text is, and I highly recommend dragging out those the SRDs or the base documents or the core book that you've purchased, and use those as a base template for how this is going to work. For 5e, I'm going to show you exactly some of the words that you need to make certain things happen. We're going to begin with a brand new character, and I'll just put this out here. We'll give him a name because, we're making him, so his name will be... No, H isn't too common for me. We'll start with Z. So his name will be Zojo. That's fine. It's strange. It's random. Now with races or heritage or lineage, whatever we're going by, the races button here on Fantasy Grounds, what we'll do is create a custom race. I am not going to pour into flavor text here. We're just going to go into exactly how to create the attributes of the race. I'll go ahead and use something like the custom lineage or the deviation lineage so that you can see how you input choices into the modifier section. We'll call this the cookies for no reason. All right, so we'll begin by inputting traits. Now, a key thing to remember here is with subraces, if you have subraces, it will show up as an option. The subrace is going to look exactly like another set race, and it is done exactly the same way. All right, so everything for a subrace follows the exact same pattern that the race card works. So just remember that you can add as many subraces as you want. And when we look at something like the Nasi, they have lots of subraces to them. You can even personally modify individual things instead of, you can go modify the races that are already present in the guide as well. So with the races, I'm going to begin with the meat of the race, which is the actual attribute changing behaviors. And so we'll begin with doing this as like the custom lineage. In fact, why don't we do... That it? That it? That it? Yeah. So we'll add the ability score increases to begin with. So, and I'll say ability score increase. Just the point here, this could be listed as not as beefy. You don't have to make the headers read a particular way. Dark vision is one of those things where that's actually really nice to label it dark vision, because then all you have to say is the distance at which they get dark vision for. But so for this case, you would normally say, your constitution score increases by 2 or something like that. But since we're going with the variant rule here, the player is going to select what these are, right? So then we'll say 1 ability score of your choice increases by 2. All right, so that's the big stat. And then we'll say 1 ability score of your choice increases by 1. Okay, this is going to mean that they're going to select both their primary and secondary stats. I'm not adding a subrace here. You could add subraces and have them be the +1, which is how most of the book goes. But now that those ability scores are there, we're also going to say something like skilly. And you're going to pick a proficiency, right? So we'll give him 2, like a half elf or something. You gain proficiency, terrible at spelling, in 2 skills of your choice. Okay, so now this is the meat of whatever race it is you're doing. Now, if you were going to assign a specific skill, you would just say you gain proficiency in this skill, right? Or you can say, you gain proficiency in 1 skill. But all of it is just about you writing the form of how they have written it. So now that we've established these 3 things, there are the 3 generic traits that everybody gets assigned, and we'll say those are languages, size, and speed. Okay, so when it comes to size, it is as simple as stating what size this is going to be. Languages has a exact phrase that you need to use, but once you use the phrase, you can actually type any language you want in there. It doesn't have to be one that's predefined. Now, if you want it to have a script like runes as dwarves or elven script, you need to assign that in the configurations tab up here. You can go and assign languages and what alphabets they use. But from here, you can make it say anything you want, and you can even select that as an available speech after it's been assigned. It just doesn't have any alphabet. Okay, so languages, the specific phrase, you can speak, read, and write. Whatever follows can be what you want. So when we say this, we could be a single language, multiple language. Almost every one of them says, some personal language. So we'll say Cookie Lin and common for some reason. I delete that second phrase on almost every game I play. Not because I hate my players, but because I want the races to have value in speaking. All right. Size. So you just declare the size. So your size is, for this race, we'll just say small. It is relatively unimportant in 5e to designate medium or small. There's not a ton that changes. So I would let that play out and role play more, as it just doesn't seem to be a big factor here. So, and then speed. So this is just walking speed. So we will say like walking speed is, you can say 25 feet. I'm going to say 30 feet because that's what almost everything is. And now around these statements, you can put anything you want. All right. So only these statements signify the importance. So we could say, despite having 4 legs, your walking speed is 30 feet. All right. So you can create the fluff around the statements as long as you make sure that these statements are said in the text. Okay. So this is a super generic race thing. All right. And if we take this guy, we can go show that it works and drop him in. He'll say, okay, choose 1 ability score to increase by 2. We're going to say strength. Choose 2 skills to choose from. I don't know, Arcana, animal handling. Sure. Great. All right. So this will also work. I know some people got annoyed with me about the character wizard. If you go to the character wizard, it shows up here too, guys. So even when you create custom races and things like that, they show up here and you can go through the selection process just like normal. But okay, so we've got some race, and now let's make up a class. Okay, so some of the context here remains the same. Now, a lot of the individual charts and things that they show up, they're superficial. All right, so the number of spells per level, proficiency bonuses, things like that. The chart is 100% unnecessary. the game knows the architecture behind the system. And so I'll demonstrate. We'll call it like a brute. No flavor. I'm not going to put anything in here right now. You are going to set the HD per level. This is just picking. It's this written in the same context. So we'll call it 1D, not an exclamation D10, but a 1D10. So we'll say 1D10 per level. You can say per brute level, that's how they normally phrase it. Not significant. We can hand them any proficiencies. This is just going to come into an entry into their ability section. So we'll just say light, medium, and shields, and then give them, strength, dexterity, constitution, and then with these skill section, you can either give them a set list, and this is how you'll say choose 2, and then if you were going to give them a set list, you say choose 2 from, and you would list, or we can say, like in this case, choose 2 from any skill. All right, choose any 2. And if you list tools or things like that, they just show up as lines in the ability section, which I'll show you here in a second. We'll say simple melee, martial melee, for no particular reason. Again, setting multi-class proficiencies. You merely list them here. This only occurs if taken after your first level, right? Like if somebody does that. So we're going to begin with how the feature class works here. And when you open it, you're going to note some extra sections. You should only ever have one thing checked for specialization choice, and the specialization required are only for things that require a set specialization. So I'm going to get there. I'm going to begin by showing you what I meant by the system understands how it's set up. So if we want this to be a full spellcaster, we give it spellcasting at first level. All right, so we'll say spellcasting at first level. All right, now if we gave it spellcasting at third level, then it would stagger its progression the way that Arcane Trickster would. All right, you don't need a chart. You don't have to do all that stuff in the beginning to make the system just work on this. Okay. So when you give them the spell casting, it's going to stagger that progression. Okay, you do have to set how do they spell cast, and just for learning purposes, you can designate whatever you want. So we'll say strength is your spell casting ability for brute. All right, now this is going to set them as gaining spellcasting at first level, and what we'll demonstrate here is, so we see Mr. Character, and we see that he gained his selections there, right? Currently, he has 0 actions, and in his abilities tab, he only has his Cookie Lin in common and things given him by his race. So if we go take Brute class, and I drag this in, you'll note that it updates his HD. We'll go pick 2 more things. So we'll just do Deception History for no particular reason. All right. And it is selected here. And then when we go to his abilities, it has listed the proficiencies that we gave them. It says he has spellcasting, and the game knows that he has spells. Okay. And if we look in this, it knows that it is based on strength. All right. So this is really as straightforward as that gets. Now, just to demonstrate the specialization separation, so anything that you add here needs to be exactly what you put in the features section. So if we say brute mind and brute force, all right, if we say this is what must be in the feature section. So we'll add 2 features up here. All right, we will give them to them at level 2. All right. And this is brute mind, I don't know, of explosions. And then this one is going to be brute force of will. All right. So what we say here, we need to list that this is only for the brute mind, and then on this one we will list that this is only for the brute force. Okay. Now this itself is not the selection, which is why this only appears once. So we will say brute specialization. I don't know. Happens at level 2. You click specialization choice. That's it. You can list flavor text here if you want. This is going to prompt the decision. Okay. Now, once it prompts the decision, they will pick between whatever's listed down here in specializations. So you'd have 16 things listed down here in specializations. As long as you have this selected as a specialty choice, there it is. If you have this selected more than one time, they're going to be able to select things again. You can do it this way if you wanted something to, maybe you have different archetypes and you want them to be able to pick up a first archetype, and the first archetype is going to get them all the way from 2 to 20, but they get a second archetype at like 11. You can do that. All right. You just bring up the specialization choice at 2 and at 11, and then they'll be able to pick twice from the specializations. That's going to permit them to gain the abilities only from, when they got it from 11 to 20. So something to think about. But all right, so now you've got your 2 selections, and we're going to give them an ability. All right, I'm only going to make up one of these, and this is where I was talking about the example for spells. And this all goes back to like how the wording is on the thing. So I'm going to make a really complicated one so that it shows you all of the things that can be stacked up inside of an ability. So we'll say make a melee spell attack. Target must make a Constitution saving throw. Target takes 3d6 damage, bludgeoning damage, and falls prone on a failed save, or half as much damage and does not fall prone on a success. Okay, so I just added all of that stuff in there so you get to see this when it happens. So now we are going to level ourselves up to level 2 by dragging this over. It has prompted the specialization choice. We will choose brute force. You will note that in the abilities tab, we only gained of will. We did not gain the of explosions. Now, when we got the brute force of will, we have this ability. We can just drag this onto our power section. I'll just write brute. Okay. And now we can define that this is his strength. All right. So everything's based off of that. Now, each one of these separate phrases is what pulled up the abilities here. All right. So making a melee spell attack, a ranged spell attack, a ranged weapon attack, right? That is what pulls up the attack roll. Target must make a Constitution, Dexterity, Charisma saving throw. That pulls up there. Now, I did make it slightly more complicated with how it delivers it, as if you have multiple targets, you may want to say makes a Constitution saving throw. You can label it the other way, which is succeed on a, Constitution saving throw. But by separating it this way, I needed to make a separate statement about what happens on a failure or success. So the separate statement is what causes this. If you'll note Constitution saving throw, if we select it, it says half on success is directly linked to the fact that we made it so that the target takes damage, failed, or half as much damage. That half as much damage is what it is at. You can add a condition. I could have said poisoned, right? I could have said, I don't know, like we could pick other things. But as long as you state a condition that exists in your game, you can add those conditions on top of it. You can put a duration on it as well, but you would just say falls prone for 2 rounds, which is silly because I chose prone. I could have said blinded but this is how the ability can be pulled up here. Now, from each one of these, you don't have to use this giant wording that I used, but you can. If you want to just make a single melee attack and cause damage, that's fine. But I just wanted you to demonstrate the context for each one of these abilities. So, and that's why this happened. So now that he's level 2, he's gained an extra first level spell because, you know, he's a spellcaster. Okay. Well, this has been making some homebrew races and classes. If you look at some of those principles on how to word something in a spell, the only change here is that wording goes into the block down here, and then you can decide the rest of your spell information as normal. But you can create abilities and spells that way, and I even go through and do that. If I look at sources, I can go and pull things like, you know, from a bard. Well, bard's not good because they have spells too, but here, like a drunken monk, I have added abilities for them so that they can drag them onto their ability sheet and tells them when they can use them and stuff. But there's nothing stopping you from designing it that way. And I hope you found this useful.